Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Coaching Uncovered podcast. My name is Chris Barry, and I'm going to be your host for today. Joining us, we have Marcus Dupuis. Marcus, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Very cool. Well, I
Glad
can
to be
tell you,
here. Mhm.
I'm glad to have you here, and I'm excited to chat a little bit more about your coaching business. I know that you have a ton of experience in this space, and I'm excited to kind of dive deep into it. Before we get into the details of everything, can you just give everyone here that's either watching or listening an overview of what you coach people on and what you help them with?
Yeah, well, I've been in the personal growth industry and realm for um, over 30 years, 40 years, and I draw on different modalities to help people find center and calm themselves so that they can find the next step in their life. I call myself sometimes a crossroads coach, and so help people in the big shifts in their life. And I draw on several modalities. I have a huge yogic background. I'm not your typical yogi. I teach the science of yoga and the mind of yoga are two of my lectures.
Mm,
And I wrote a book. I'm an author. The book is I Breathe, Therefore I Am. It's a book on breathing. So I people like to put me in the box of I'm a breathing coach. I'm a breath coach,
mm,
but breathing techniques are just a tool that we can use to calm the mind and get to a place where we can find inspiration and creativity. And I also translated a book called The Art of Listening to Life from Spanish to English. And the art of listening to life is a huge factor in trying to understand what life is trying to tell us. Life is messaging us all the time. And most people are just missing the messages, right? Not getting it, not understanding why what's going on is going on in their life. So I put together several courses. I have three major courses that I put out through the years. One is a breathing course called Breathing 101. So obviously Breathing 101 from the beginning. Um, and then I have another program called the 8 Phases of Big Life Change. So 8 phases of change, and those are the steps as you go into your changes of life. What are the steps to take? People get very overwhelmed with even taking that first step. Um, and then just lecturing. I'm an intermediary. I've always been the person who can explain complex ideas in a simple way. Every industry I've ever been in, that's what I always end up doing. I'm always there in the middle, bridging between the scientists, the architects and the engineers and the user and the applicability,
mhm,
and then I use I also have a course on the chakras, the 8 chakras, and it's understanding what the chakras are. There's so much loose talk about chakras, and this is about understanding what their functions are, what they represent, and what it is to balance them and all that. So when you take all of those together and you put them all together, it's just different practices and modalities for calming the mind and finding center, which is a huge step towards knowing where you want to go, what you want to do, making decisions, and all that sort of thing.
absolutely. Well, if you don't have the mind sound, if you don't have the right foundation, it's very difficult to build the building up and have success in any area of life, whether we're talking personally, business, or anything.
That's right. And we're in a society that generates so much noise that it's very difficult to get past it. And so, one of my breathing techniques, one of the first breathing techniques I used to teach, because I've been a businessman, I've been a very successful uh, businessman for many years with corporations and employees and the whole 9 yards. And so, you know, getting to that place where you can just calm yourself down to a place where you can eliminate all the noise is a huge step. And most people are just stuck in the noise. And then on top of the noise, there's just bad nutrition and just eating junk food. And so junk food and violent movies and there's so many areas we can go into to identify the noise that keeps us from being effective. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you obviously have a plethora of knowledge in many different facets that obviously all integrate within each other. What made you first get started? Obviously, in the very beginning, you didn't have all of these different things and different parts of it. I'm
Hmm.
sure obviously as you did more and more coaching, you continue to add more tools to your tool belt. In the very
Hmm.
beginning, 24 years ago, right? When you first officially, right, made this your full-time thing,
Hmm.
what made you want to go ahead and transition to this and really get started this as your full-time?
Well, it actually goes a lot further back. So what happens is when I was 10 years old, 12 years old, my mother became one of the first yoga teachers in Canada, right? And when I say first yoga teachers, I mean night courses at the college sort of thing, where yoga was starting to become a little more normal. And then I spent a couple of years through several trips to India and lived in ashrams and studied in yoga and studied and meditated and learned about all sorts of things. And so it's been my life since the beginning, so to speak, right? So
Mm,
a lot of people ask me now, where did it start? Where did you begin? And I feel that um, it just came that way.
mm,
But then it was the art of listening to life that actually made me say, well, what is it that I want to really deliver? What is it that I really want to do, right?
mm,
But the modalities and being, having yoga as part of my life and using breathing techniques right back in my 20s. And my first ashram, actually, I lived in India, I was 20 years old, so 19 years old, 20.
mm,
And whatever, just to make a long story short, what happened was I reached a place at the ashrams and in meditation and with the monks in India where I had gotten to a place of clarity of what this whole show is about, what this existence is, what is this exercise of taking on a physical body and having this experience. And I realized I was way too young to just go to the cave and just become a monk, and that's not the choice that I wanted to choose for this experience, for this incarnation. So I entered the world of business, and all of that. And I had a business phase that where I had, where, as I mentioned earlier, and I did that for a couple of decades, had a family,
mm,
and did all that stuff. And then when I got to year 2000, which is why this is 24 years into it now, when it hit the year 2000, I had accomplished what needed to be accomplished in the business world in the sense that I
mm,
had the retail, I had, employees, I had all the big bills and all of that stuff. And it wasn't fulfilling. There was a part of it that just wasn't feeding my soul. It wasn't feeding, that overall purpose that we've come here to experience, right? So I shifted out and I sold off the businesses and re-entered into this investigation of self-discovery, right?
mhm,
And helping people through their self-discovery, which by the way happened all the time in a natural way. One of the things that happened to me was I would meet people I hadn't seen in 10 years and hey, how are you doing? And then they'd say, hey, Marcus, you changed my life. And I did. Because you see, I didn't do it with intention. I just did it through action. I did it through living my life in that
mm,
adventurous way of experiencing things. And so people would so now they were coming to me and asking me, how do I do it and techniques? And so I was having to formulate and put it together. And that's how I developed the programs.
mm,
And developing, and just one big change, one big shift that really showed me the way was when I met the author of The Art of Listening to Life in Spain.
mm.
Um, and I decided to translate that book and lecture it. And my TED talk is called The Art of Listening to Life. So that became a pivotal moment of really committing to it and saying, wow, I've got a framework now. I've got something that I can really deliver. So then I
Yeah,
started putting together all the ingredients.
yeah. it's cool how you have so wide and vast of a knowledge and a depth, and it's this journey. It's really cool to hear. Obviously, as you talk about from being young and your mother to going to India, and then how things continue to build. So it's awesome to go ahead and hear. Now, you obviously got started in that way. You've officially been coaching for 24 years, with even obviously more experience before then, as you just described.
Mhm.
Over the past, let's just say, just 24 years, there's obviously ups and downs of the business. There are things that are great, and then things times where maybe are not as great. As kind of reflecting upon it, what have been some of your favorite parts about owning your business? Number one, and then number two, what have been some of the most challenging parts of owning your business?
Well, the first thing is that there are people who are entrepreneurial by
Mm,
nature, right? They're just entrepreneurial, period. So I really almost have never had a normal job. I've
yep.
always had to create my own businesses because that's just who I am, right? So the entrepreneurial part of me is very alive and always creating the businesses. And there was a period until the 2019 that was very successful. We had workshops in Spain, Mexico, and Canada where we were doing the workshop was called The Art of Listening to Life, an adventure of the soul.
Mm,
And it was good. We had workshops, successful, good attendance. Things were really moving. And then, of course, with the pandemic and everything that changed because we couldn't have groups and couldn't have the meetings anymore, and that all went away. So this transition into the digital realm of presentation and of exchange became the way. And so fantastic times, unbelievable how much fun it has been, right?
hmm
But into the challenge. The challenge is the broadness and the vastness that you alluded to.
hmm
It's really difficult for me to define who I am and what I do because
mm,
there's so much in it, right? It, there's so much experience and such a broad set of modalities and tools that I use. It becomes very difficult. So, for instance, I could sell myself as a breathing coach. That's what I
hmm
do, that's a small box for me.
Yeah.
There are people who can be that breath coach and then can do that, and they would be, a very fulfilling thing. But for me, it's just one of the tools. So, um, transitioning into this digital realm and just having it all, presented. I have three courses, and they don't sell a lot because I can't get to that place of selling a bunch of them.
Mm,
People love it when they get it, and my book sells. It doesn't sell on Amazon. They seem to not like the fact that I'm selling something that helps people heal themselves and center themselves.
mm,
But when I do a lecture, I'll sell a box of books at the back of the room. No problem. Everybody loves the stuff. So the content is great, but it's been difficult to get it out there into the mass sort of promotional media realm.
yeah. Understood. So you've obviously been doing this for a while. You talked about some of the, the favorite parts of the business. You talked about some of the challenging parts of the business. One of the biggest challenges that a lot of coaches face is something, it sounds like similar to what you just described as one of your challenges too, right? Of, getting leads, getting people interested and understand how to grow it. Obviously, you've been successful over the past 24 years of doing this. And even still, you're like, yeah, that's one of the things that I want to continue to grow and do over the past. Well, and I know I'm not only pigeonholing you to the 24 years, because I know it's much more than that, but saying on the official 24 years,
Mm-hmm.
what have been some of the best techniques that you've used in order to generate leads, and how are you currently generating leads now?
Well, there's an interesting shift that has happened because mm, back in the early 2000s, I would contact wellness centers all over the world, like so Spain, Thailand, Mexico, and Canada. And the wellness center would mm, literally get excited about what it is that I had to offer. And then they would do the promotion and they would set up a workshop and they would, use their database, right? So what I would do is I would go use a wellness center. That wellness center would tap into their database and we'd have presentations. And in fact, last winter, I went down to southern Mexico to where we had done workshops back in 2015. And they said, "Oh, you're coming back." And they set up workshops and I just walk in and do the presentations. And it's sort of like a rock star thing where you everything is all set up and you just walk in and deliver. Oh, and I enjoy very much, right?
Mm,
And so that's one of the highlights. That's definitely one of the fun parts of it.
mm,
But I have to say that whatever has happened over the past few years, which is very confusing and very difficult for anyone to really explain, that doesn't work anymore. That just doesn't work anymore. It's crazy. I contact wellness centers and it's just like, cool. Yeah, no, no, we got our own thing going. Or yeah, we don't do that anymore. Or so something has shifted, something has changed that I can't utilize that technique anymore. But that was the technique that was very, very successful until 2019.
got it. Okay.
Mhm.
So you have the previous wellness center, and then now, what are you currently doing in order to generate leads, get people interested in that?
Well, maintain a strong presence on most of the platforms, and keep building content and just so you see, once you go into the content, like in Facebook, for instance, the guides themselves, you go into guides, it's called, and then in there I have most of my material. And so,
Mm,
and people can, what I'll do with those platforms is I have a lot of the material in order to show that I have the knowledge in the background. And then, of course, try to engage and then offer one of my programs. So the 8 phases of life change, that was a program that was basically a $3,000 program. And we went through the 8 phases, and the 8 phases, one phase per week was sort of
mm,
the concept. Some people were already pretty advanced and already in a place where they understood what they needed to do. They just needed some more practices and techniques to get out.
got
But,
it.
that was one of the big programs that I did, on top of the workshops. The workshops were the main activity until 2019.
Mm,
And so since then, I have the content, I have it all out there, just having a challenge in engagement. So last winter, like I said, I went down and my lectures were called The Mind of Yoga.
yeah.
Uh, it was all in Spanish.
Yeah.
I fluent in Spanish and French, by the way. And so I went down and again, there I was with a room full of people, and the engagement is completely different. It's just
Mm,
so powerful to be able to get together with others and do it in a live way. And again, when I do lectures in that way, in that format, um, if I have a box full of books at the back of the room, they're all gone, right?
yeah.
And then on the internet with Google and with, YouTube and Facebook and everything, I just don't get the engagement. I just find that everyone is just a tourist. Everyone is just scrolling and scrolling and no one actually enters. It's almost like everything's become a rabbit hole. Anything anyone enters is called a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And so getting people to enter the rabbit hole of their own balance, of their own happiness, of what it
Mm,
is that actually fulfills them is, yeah, that if I could put my biggest challenge down to something, it would be that. How to
mhm,
get people to engage anymore. It's just everyone
mm,
is just tick-tocking away. It's just, swipe, swipe, swipe and gone. It's just, TikTok came up with the 1 minute presentation and that it reflects the attention span that society actually has.
absolutely. And the crazy part is there's statistics that say when it comes to videos, I mean, you have, and this is even being a little generous, honestly, you have 2 seconds to capture someone's attention. And
Mhm.
if you even, this might sound a little creepy, not in a creepy way. Let's say like I'm sitting out in some sort of like public setting, like at a restaurant, or you're on a public transportation, or you're sitting and waiting in line somewhere. I really enjoy, and honestly, sometimes I don't do this with my family because it's a little less creepy. I'll just watch people scroll on social media, and it is so interesting to see it because it's literally just like they don't even look that much. And
No.
even if I were to probably videotape myself doing this, I'd probably do the same exact thing. So it's so interesting how it's just gone ahead and changed the way that we move and operate. Even, for example, let's say an older generation that hadn't had this previously, right? It's pushed them to be more instant gratification, that sort of stuff. But think about even just the current generation, right? And how they're just, that's all that they know of just scroll, do next, instant gratification, dopamine, dopamine, dopamine. And it's so interesting how that
Mm.
changes. You said attention spans. I mean, I could go down a whole rabbit hole right now, and I'll refrain myself of, even if you look at so much dopamine. Have you ever seen the Social Dilemma, the documentary?
Oh, right. Yeah. I
Yes.
touched on it. I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. So I enjoy that one. Another person too. Have you heard of Dr. Andrew Huberman?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So Huberman does
Hmm.
a phenomenal job. Sometimes on his podcast, he gets very in depth and a little too deep and heavy when it comes to content. But one thing he does do in general is he takes the very complex topics and he simplifies it in a way that the ordinary person can understand. And one thing that I realized, I said I wasn't going to go into it, but I'm going into it, but I'll keep it quick, was as you're scrolling on social media, it's just constant dopamine hits over and over and over again. And what happens is that over time, because of such large dopamine spikes, the same exact thing, as much as it spikes down, it spikes down, or excuse, spikes up. It spikes
Hmm.
below too. And over time, the body says, okay, and you probably know these things, that I just find it so interesting. So I'm going to share it maybe for listeners
Hmm.
too.
Hmm.
The dopamine, you're infusing and adding so much dopamine externally into the body that the body says, okay, given that we have so much dopamine and we don't want to be this high, I don't need to produce as much. So what happens is that the average dopamine levels of the body actually decrease.
Hmm.
And so for those reasons, we say, okay, are so many people anxious? I mean, there's so many different ways to go behind it and different reasons. From a neurochemical perspective, dopamine, the only difference between anxiety and excitement is the presence of dopamine. And so when you have all of these people that are just constantly scrolling, that their baseline dopamine level has decreased, now when someone used to feel excited or anything along those lines, they now feel anxiety because their body is not accustomed to producing as much dopamine what it needs in order to feel certain emotions. And so tying that back into, the conversation that we're having, it's so interesting how, as we talked about, the presence of social media, even just, you look at COVID and how that exacerbated certain things, and people are even more online. There's all of these different things, and how that
Hmm.
affects attention spans, how that affects how business is done, how content is made, everything, how products are delivered. It's a very interesting time, to say the least.
Mm. Mm. And the other challenge with that is that the what they need to do to generate that dopamine, what they need to do to get your attention becomes more and more intense and harder and bigger and bigger. And if you even look at Hollywood movies, for instance, you know, they're the level of violence has reached a level where it's just absolute. If you showed it to someone from, well, your grandparents or your parents,
Mm-hmm.
you show
Yeah.
them stuff like, they go, that's ridiculous. They can't, wow. And in modern society or in the younger generations, normal.
Or on the flip
Tearing
side,
limbs off and blood spurting. It's like,
well,
oh, that's all normal.
mhm,
It has been normalized, you see. So it's the same thing with what you're referring to, is that it becomes normalized. And so, well, how do you do it? Well, you got to break through with something more extreme. You got to break through with
mhm,
something more ridiculous.
yeah.
And in the 2 second attention span, you're right. And if you look at a lot of there's two examples that I have. One is comedies. A comedy routine starts with a punchline. They'll take a punchline from the middle of the presentation and put it in the first 2 seconds so that they can grab you there. Because if you just go with an introduction, it's like, bored with introductions. I want the juice, man. So there you go. There's that. And then, of course, movies. There was a phase a few years ago where they started with the most violent part of the movie right off the start, just to set the tone. And then it would go back into storytelling and then they tell the story. But they start
Mhm.
off with people getting their heads cut off and then start telling the story. So it's that's and that just the fact that it's done that way now, we know that those first few seconds is our chance to get the attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting place. So as we, you know, we're talking about generating leads, capturing attention, then essentially turning that attention into someone that says, raise their hand, says, yes, I'm interested. I want to learn more about it. Let's say that you get a lead, right? Whether it be in the past when you're working with the wellness centers, or today where you're working at in-person events, or whether it's online social media, whatever it is, you have someone that you now have a conversation with. And now it's the next step, the thing that most coaches dread because they love coaching people, but they can't stand selling because they feel slimy or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
What are the ways that you walk people, prospects, across the finish line to go ahead and become a paying client of yours?
Well, I guess without being completely sort of aware of the technique that I'm using, um, I'm very custom in the sense that I deal with a person. You see, we have a process that we call the seed event. The seed event is looking for what would have happened in your life that created a pattern of response or created a reaction of some sort or created a symptom, created a disease, created all kinds of things. We call it the seed event. We go looking for the seed event.
Hmm.
And so when I'm dealing with someone, I essentially just keep engaging and I keep getting into that looking for the seed event. Now, what
Hmm.
happens when I do that is that I hit on certain sensitivities or certain ideas that the person resonates with. And that is what convinces them that they want to spend more time working on it with me.
Hmm.
So it's like delivering, the modern words would be delivering more free content. But
Hmm.
my free content is custom. It's very specific to the person because why? Because we're digging into their their symptom. Okay, we call it the symptom. What is it that's in your life? The first phase in the 8 phases of life change, the first one is identifying the pain. I People sometimes that are in the discomfort, they don't know what the hell's going on in their life, and they're having a hard time, but they can't even identify what the real problem is. And so as I dig and or work with the person in going towards what it is that the actual symptom is, then we can go to the next thing, which is to figure out what the seed event is. What created that symptom? What is that seed? You see, because a symptom in a disease is really a seed sprouting. It's something that's
Hmm.
growing. Conditions get worse. Disease can get worse. And when it's doing that, that's the seed event expanding and growing.
Hmm.
When we find the seed event, though, when we find what it is that caused that pattern of response, caused that trauma, caused that condition that they're dealing with, some people just knowing what caused it, knowing where it started, is enough to heal them. Just knowing, just the knowledge of that's why I do that. That's why I react that way. That's why I'm feeling this in my body. That's why these trapped emotions are expressing themselves this way.
Yeah.
And so as I deliver more of that very specific custom information to a person, that's essentially what gets them across the finish line. But it's a very slow one-on-one process. I have had a very hard time manufacturing a delivery that applies to everyone. And that's
Yeah.
been my biggest challenge, So we talk scaling all the time. Scale, scale, scale. Yeah, well, okay, well, scale. How can we scale when everyone's so different?
True.
So that is definitely been one of my challenges. And getting people across the finish line, another challenge I've had, which is very unfortunate. And I hope this doesn't get misinterpreted,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of young people. I lost one contract to a guy, a 22-year-old with a
Mm,
laptop and a nice presentation.
mm,
And we're talking a person who the client was a person who was in their 50s, could have been 50 or 48 or so,
mm,
going through this huge life change and had all kinds of challenges and didn't know which direction to take. And the 22-year-old won the contract. So how does a 22-year-old coach a person through all those life changes compared to someone like myself, right? So how
right.
do I differentiate myself from that kind of person who has the tech savvy, is able to present themselves and do videos and use all kinds of keywords and get it. And that
Mm,
that has been a very interesting challenge for me.
mm,
Because normally when you think of presentations and going to a lecture and meeting someone, you're talking to people who, I don't know, Eckhart Tolle and Deepak Chopra and people who have, all this experience and all this background, and you get a sense that they really know what they're talking about.
yeah,
But with the internet and with Zoom calls and Instagram presentations and reels and all of that, um, it becomes a game of who has the best video, and
yeah.
so, not the best
Well,
background, not the best experience. Yeah.
you got it. And that's even the reason why I created TD Coach, right? My company that then obviously created this community and everything was my background was being a salesperson for these coaches. And essentially I was selling, and then people would come back to me, hey, this isn't what I promised, blah, 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 whatever it is. And two pronged. Actually, yeah, yeah, two pronged. Number one, the foundation of everything for me is my faith in God. And I'm not just doing and selling this because I just want to make a buck. Yes, of course, that's a part of it, of making money.
Hmm.
Don't get me wrong. It's
Hmm.
ultimately how can we help people? How can we improve their lives and everything? And so it just didn't sit right with me that I'm selling people this program, and a good chunk were getting success, but there were some that I wish weren't coming back or weren't there, and there was holes in the boat. So that just didn't sit right with me, number one. And then number two, from a sales perspective too, if they refunded, that's my commission too. So like I want to go ahead and I want to make sure that my commission stays protected. So I found myself naturally getting more involved in the operations and delivery and fixing holes in the boat because that's just how I work. From those things I just told you, I just even wanted
Hmm.
to improve systems. I started off as an appointment setter in one company and then went into a closer at another company and then ended up running my own sales agency where I would work with a bunch of different coaches. And I then ended up transitioning full time into running the operations for a sales coaching business. And the reason why I bring it up is because I started going through and having these different experiences with different coaching businesses from all the stuff I just described to you. At the very end, we actually started teaching other coaches how to build coaching programs. And through all of this experience and getting to know them and selling and placing salespeople and teaching, it's the same exact thing that you just said. I realized that it's not the best coach that wins. The person who gets the best results, the person who has the
Hmm.
most experience, it's the person that's the best marketer. That's the one who wins. And that's what
Yeah.
tore my heart apart because I can't speak to this 22-year-old and what it is. But obviously, with your background, with your knowledge, with your experience, everything you've done, we know that you would have been able to significantly help this 50-year-old man in this massive life change. And the thing is the question you brought up, how much could this 22-year-old really help push this guy across where he wants to go ahead and be and really get him the success? And that's the part that tore me apart of you have people who are so extraordinarily talented and have a lot of knowledge in their space, yet they just don't have the knowledge and acumen to run a coaching business. So that's why I made TD Coach. That's why I made this community and why we're even on the Zoom right now
Mm.
talking about this. Because how can we level the playing field? How can we make it so that those people that really care about getting people results, that really have the experience and have the ability to do that, they are the ones that are actually getting the clients, that they are at least visible so they can go ahead and grow it and do all that stuff rather than a couple of bad actors in the space that are phenomenal. You can't take this away from them. They are so good at marketing and selling, right? Yet their delivery is terrible. So that's why I made TD coach, and that's the reason why I love doing this because yeah.
Mhm. Well, the delivery of the sales pitch is good. It's the follow-up and the next stages that we just don't have the background and don't have the experience, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds good, and again, a lot of keywords and
Hmm.
all the words that are used in the personal growth space and all of that. And then when you start entering into it, like when you enter the 8 phases of life change with me, whoa, it gets deep and it gets really wide. But once the the person with less experience does the sales pitch and gets the person, then what do you do? And that's where the disappointment comes, and what you talked about, where you're having to refund your commission because it's like once you really get into it, here
Hmm.
where's the beef, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So
So
this has been awesome, and I know we're getting close to the time of wrapping up. I do have one last question. I have one question for you, and then I also do want to go ahead and just kind of put out there of how people can get in contact with you. Before we get into that, though, the last question I have for you is continue to go through the process, right? We generate a lead, someone who has interest. We go ahead and, as you talked about, the sales process, and you talked about there's not a specific same thing I do every time. Yet what I like to see it as is a framework. Your framework is I come, I meet with the person, I provide value, I really understand where they are, where they want to be, how I can help them, I give them insight, and then I just transition, say, hey, if I could help you do X, Y, and Z, would you want to work together, right? So that's essentially kind of
mhm.
the process of what you run them through. Now you have a client of yours, right? Somebody who's paid you. What are some of the best things that you have done in order to retain clients, to keep them happy and get them results?
Well, ooh, that is a multi-pronged question
It
because
is.
one one of the great frustrations of my life and the process that I've been in for years is that I help people and get them to a place with techniques and routines and practices and things that they can do to better themselves, to evolve, to grow, whatever it is that they're after. People don't do the work. People are really lazy. And so, and I got a lazy streak, you know, I'm not just pointing the finger and saying people are lazy. Humans have a lazy streak. There's this little part of us that needs a reason to do it and needs to be motivated. And that's been one of the greatest frustrations and disappointments for me is that, and I've had contracts where I'm working with someone. We will have a 4 week or an 8 week process where we're working together, and they're really growing, and it's doing really, really well, but they need more time. And so now I need to sell them some more time. I need to sell them
Mm-hmm.
another 4 week program or a continuation or a follow-up. Like, do you want to keep doing this? And what I've found is the commitment to the work, the commitment to doing it, the commitment to breathing, the commitment to meditation, the commitment to self-improvement and continuing and keeping the pressure on and just keeping it going is very weak. It's very,
Mm-hmm.
very, very frustrating. And so sometimes I found myself in some of my conversations and presentations just being a little harsh and just going, are you lazy?
Mm-hmm.
Which is too much. You can't do that. That's just being too honest,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just too fast, too quick. But that has been one of the biggest challenges is getting people to do the work. I've even started with people where they're motivated in the first few conversations, the first days, and then they lose steam.
Yeah.
And you know, as much as anyone wants to call themselves a healer, they're not the healer. The
Mm-hmm.
person heals themselves. You're guiding the person towards healing. You're guiding the person towards, that better health, but they have to do the work. I mean, if I think of nutritionists, very often nutritionists, will have this whole nutrition program, and then the person just goes home and eats cheesies. I came across cheesies lately, that's why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they end up eating junk food and not following the program, right? So I just use that as an example, but that's what it's like with personal growth and the intention. How powerful, how strong is the intention? And so I don't know. I'm at that crossroads myself, trying to figure out how to get that engagement and how to keep people motivated. Um, People are really motivated by 2-hour presentations, so Tony Robbins, great. Let's sit down, let's listen to Tony Robbins get all excited and tell us how to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then go out and drink alcohol and eat junk food and not progress. So it's a little bit the syndrome of taking a pill. Everyone wants it to be very simple. I just want to take a pill and fix it. Well, when it comes to really doing the work that we're talking about in personal growth and in your own evolution, that's not how it works. You practice. You got to really sit down and do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when we do retreats, for instance, we say, well, we're going to sit down now. We're going to do a 15-minute breathing routine. We're going to do a 10-minute breathing routine. My first
Mm-hmm.
routines were 5 minutes long, and you get amazing benefit from a 5-minute breathing routine. But people
Mm.
don't even do that.
Yeah.
And then when I hear people say, well, I don't have time. Well, you don't have 5 minutes. You got serious issues, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the that's when I went a little broader than your question was there, but
No,
that's the idea.
it was helpful. Well, this has been awesome. I appreciate you sharing your insights and everything. For anybody who is interested in either possibly working with you or they just really resonated with the message and everything that you said today, what is the best way for people to get in communication with you?
Well, my companies, all the companies I've had for many years are called Elemental. And so elementallife.ca, elemental living, elementallife.ca is the main way. And what the idea behind that is that what are the elements needed to create a fulfilling and balanced happy life? What are the elements needed to create a happy life? So elemental living, elemental life, elemental lifestyle. I have elemental sound. I do sound healing and work with stuff like that. Because again, people need different modalities, right? Some people are visual, some people are auditory, some people just have different ways. And so I use sound healing, which is connected to meditation, which is connected to mantras, which is connected to breathing. So it's all sort of the same, but elementallife.ca is a good place to start.
Okay, awesome. Well, once again, I know I've said it a couple times. It was great having you on, Marcus, and I look forward to chatting more very soon.
That was great. Thank you.
Of course,
We covered some good ground. That was great.
we absolutely did. So, with that said, everyone, that is going to wrap up this episode of the Coaching Uncovered podcast. You heard me say it many times. I know I got a ton of value, and I hope that you guys got a ton of value as well. For me, two massive things that really stood out for me from Marcus explaining is number one of focusing on the foundation, right? Everyone wants to talk about this aspect or this tactical thing, but you need to go ahead and get the foundations right. He was even in the very last part, he was talking about if you can't go ahead and spend 5 minutes doing this, then we got a real problem here. And that's the hard part because sometimes we get so excited, we want the result, yet we're not willing to zoom out, understand the steps that we need to take in order to get the result, and sometimes realize it might take a little bit more time because we got to work on some other stuff. So that's one thing that I really enjoyed from Marcus when he was explaining now. And then the second aspect too was leading with value, right? He was talking about his sales approach and how it's not a one size fits all. Yes, he has the framework, and ultimately what that framework is coming in and having a conversation with someone. How can I lead with value? How can I really understand where you're at now, where you want to be, and then how we can go there? And also obviously providing some tactical things or overall ideas that he can go ahead and share and then eventually transition, say, yes, like I can help you do this. Like, let's work together to make this become a reality. So those are two of the biggest things that I took away from, this episode. I hope that once again, you guys were able to get something from it. If you did like this episode, please make sure to go ahead and drop a like. And if you're not subscribed, make sure to go ahead and subscribe. And we will see you here on the next episode of the Coaching Uncovered podcast.